It's okay to struggle. In fact, I think it makes us better people, and it makes us better. It hones us, it strengthens us. Because if it's too easy, we're never going to learn. We're never going to learn today to make us better tomorrow.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. What does it take to put down the armor you spent 32 years building and actually walk back toward the people who love you? My guest today is TJ Baird, Army veteran, storyteller, poet, and founder of the Warrior Dad Stories. He served across 9 deployments, most of them in combat zones, and somewhere along the way, the armor that kept him mission ready started keeping him from his family. We get into the power of storytelling, the decade of deployment poems he wrote as a love letter to his daughter, and what the long road back from the bottom of a very deep well actually looks like. TJ's been to the bottom of that well, and this conversation is about how he climbed out. TJ Baird, thank you for joining me on this joyful rebellion today.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. This is a beautiful day in Nebraska as I'm looking outside. I know I'm retired, but I still want to play hooky from my job as a trophy husband.
Dude, I want to know how to get that job. That sounds like a sweet job. I love it.
It's a lot of cooking and cleaning and running errands. That's what it is. I love it. It's after 32 years in the Army, I'm in. I'm all in for whatever my wife needs me to do, and my dog who is next to me.
Right on. That's great. So you describe yourself as a storyteller, a father, and you are the founder of Warrior Dad Stories. I want to talk about, first, you call yourself a storyteller. And I'd love to know, at what point was it in your life where the light bulb went on and you were like, you know what? People, when I tell stories, they listen. They get engaged, they lean forward. And when I hear stories, I'm much more interested and likely to retain the information that I hear. When did that click for you in your life? Because that's fascinating to me.
When I was a kid, and I'm actually going to lean offside. I'm going to show you something. Hold on. I actually have this right here. Hold on. I can't believe you asked this question. Panther Tales.
Oh.
This was 1989 when I got published in Panther Tales along with my brother. We both wrote poems. He wrote The Man on the Moon, and I wrote about a hurricane.
Okay.
And yeah, it was awesome. We were living in Virginia Beach. First of all, it's kind of neat as a young kid. You get to see your work in this, I don't know, we call it pamphlet. And it was really neat. And then when I joined the Army, and I always wanted to teach when I was a kid. I just wasn't ready for college, wasn't ready for school. When I joined the Army, and as the years rolled by, I listened to other people sharing their stories and sharing my stories. And then I realized, if I share a story, what if I put a learning experience behind it? I find that was much easier to have resonate with other people. That's how I take a lot of my education is through stories, through watching people, through the visual and the audio. And I love reading. That's a big thing for me. But at the end of the day, if I could see it and hear it, I can retain it a lot better. And I started doing that. I had people ask me, hey, can you come and talk at this event and really just do a quick 2 or 3 minute introduction and then let people ask questions and just tell stories with a life lesson behind it. I'm like, oh my God, that'd be great. And that's why I started doing it. It's been so much fun. I love it. I could talk all day about it.
And I'd love to talk about the difference between stories and information, because it's easy enough if you've got some information to give people. It's easy enough to just list the facts. And I feel like this is maybe a gap that exists in some history classes. And like any high school in the world right now, there is this information and they want to get it across, because it is kind of important to know history, because it does repeat itself if you don't learn a whole lot about history.
Right.
And sometimes history can be a little dry. It's one of those things where, okay, this guy lived, this guy died, it was on this date, and this thing happened. And the most successful experiences I've had is when information is molded into a story. And let's just say, for example, you've got a little bit of information you do need to get across to an audience. How might you wrap that into the format of a story so it really sticks with people instead of just giving them the bullet points?
It's actually easier now as I'm a little more seasoned, which is my way of saying old, mature, maybe a little bit of wisdom in there, right? So we've had a lot of life experience. So it's easier to now go back into sometimes in the way back when I was a child, although to me it happened something yesterday, and now I've got this huge toolbox full of just stories. And then when someone asks me a question, I'm like, oh, well, how can I take that question and the theme of that question, and what story do I have that can resonate with that individual, and not just the individual, but the circumstances of their question, because it could be a personal question, it could be an organizational question, professional question. So I got to dig into that toolbox very quickly, right? Because we're on the stage, we're out with a group. You tell the story, throw that life lesson, and you weave those narratives in there. So you weave their question and you just start putting those answers in there. It's like, okay, I know here's question X. I've got a bunch of different pieces of information I want to weave through this story. And as I tell a story, I just weave it in there. Okay, at this point, based on your question, well, I won't even say based on your question, you just weave it in there. And you're right, storytelling has been around for millennia. Storytelling has been around far longer than the written word, and it is still more powerful today than the written word. We can write it down and you can read a story. Audible, I love listen to Audible because now I could feel the emotion behind the person that's narrating the story. And on the same time, I give YouTube a bunch of credit. A lot of information on YouTube, right? Because there is information. Yeah. If I want to work on my car, I want to do X, I want to do Y, I could see it, I can pause it, I can fiddle fart around with whatever I need to. And then if I really want to nerd out, I've been nerding out a lot about space because of the Artemis launch and everything else. Like, how long does it take to get to Pluto? Well, it takes 30 years to get to Pluto because of you're right, how we have to do the different orbital burns and how to get to loop these different aircraft around so they can actually slow down to get captured by Pluto's orbit, right? And they tell this story. I'm like, oh my God. And then all the while you're learning about how a spacecraft gets from the gravity well that is Earth, spin around a couple of planets, and then speed up and slow down along the way so it gets captured by Pluto's gravity. And I learned that in about 13 minutes. Now, obviously, it's not all the physics, not everything behind it, but I get the general idea of how long it would take, what you would basically need to occur to ensure that that spacecraft doesn't zip on by, and how it gets captured. And that's what's cool about it. So 15-ish minutes, I learned how we do it. And it's all about a guy telling a story with some visuals, and along the way, little nuggets of information. And so that's what I like to do is, how do you tell that story? Makes it interesting. You got to be passionate about it, right? You can't be the guy on Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller, anyone. You can't be that storyteller. You've got to show emotion. You've got to be passionate about what you want to do so you can keep the audience engaged. Maybe not all the way entertained, but definitely engaged.
In your role as you progressed in your job in the Army over all of those years, did you find it became much more useful to lead from a place where you could tell stories? And I know there's a definite chain of command in those situations in an organization like the Army. And you tell someone to do something, they're expected to do it. However, if you tell a little story and give them some context around, this is why we're doing this. This is why we're not doing this over here, because back in the 50s, a guy was run over by a tank, whatever it happens to be.
Oh my God.
And then they understand, okay, that's why we don't do this. It's not just someone's giving commands. At what point in your career were you like, okay, this is working and I'm getting really positive results from my team because I'm telling stories instead of just giving the commands?
I was in school, so at the time it was the basic non-commissioned officer course. I was in a class, as a staff sergeant in the United States Army, so I was an E6. And I was in a class, and some folks were having some challenges on the material that we were receiving. I said, oh, okay. Well, I was in a situation like this when I was in Afghanistan. Then using the material that we were learning, I put it into a story. And then we were done. Our instructor came up to me. He's like, hey, man, that was really good. That's the way you need to do it. And then he started doing it. I have been an instructor before. Sometimes you need to get the information out. And depending on the class, right? Some people are just like, hey, boop, I just need the facts and that's it. I don't need any stories. And I think over time, that's where he kind of fell into, because the class is, we don't want stories. We just want the facts. But I think our class is really more to the storytelling because of just our experiences where we were in combat for the last few years. And that's what I really learned. Like, oh my gosh, this is really powerful. And then again, it reminded me of when I wrote a poem for Panther Tales when I was a little kid. Then I started thinking about it as in my career in the Army. Like, oh, I did tell stories and I used that information. And that wasn't just me. There were other leaders that I learned it from, saying, recognize the power of having a good story with good lessons along the way. And like you said, hey, don't stand behind that tank because if that thing backs up, you may not make it, kind of thing. So I think that has helped us out. And then in my last deployment, I was a very senior guy, and geopolitics is a big deal. And I asked my team at a big meeting. They were having some questions of why is there so much external pressure on Afghanistan when it comes to all the surrounding countries, because Afghanistan is surrounded by a lot of countries. Do you understand the geopolitics of Afghanistan from the way back, from the early, like from year 0, BC, AD, all the way up through? Here's a funny story. There's a little stretch of land on the tip of the northeastern side of Afghanistan that a few miles touch China, and then there's about a 6-mile border between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Russia. And I said, hey, do y'all know why that's there? And they're like, no. I said, that's actually a buffer between the Russian Empire at the time and the British Empire. That's why that buffer is there, because Pakistan was part of the British Empire, and they didn't want it to touch the Russian Empire, so they created a buffer. And that's why it's there. That's the only reason it's there. And so I told people, understand that, and then realize the mineral resources, understand all these different things that this country provides or can provide to the world, and all the external pressures from other people. And you'll get an understanding of why all these other countries are trying to influence what is going on in Afghanistan. I said, how about do this? And I did it for my staff. I want a 1-page, and I'm going to do it too. We're going to learn, and we all pick like different parts and different mineral resources and everything else. And together we learned, and I said, okay, now tell the story behind it. And so we would sit down in the evening, and then we were able to get up on our roof, and we'd just sit up there, and someone would just say, okay, here we go. And they would tell a story about a history lesson. And I said, just make sure it's a story, because I don't want to hear rote memory. I don't want to hear rote memorization. No one wants to hear that. And you sit around with your non-alcoholic drink, because you don't drink in Afghanistan. You didn't do that. And someone would spend about 20, 30 minutes just talking about history. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. Yeah, I loved it. I was like, man, this does work.
And everyone came away a little wiser and maybe understood their role in the world a little bit better.
Yeah, and I learned a lot too. I learned a lot.
I bet. Now, the second way you describe yourself, the bio that I've seen, is first storyteller, second father. And when you're a father, you do tell a lot of stories.
Yes.
And that is another learning mechanism for the kids. And the stories get a little more colorful as they get older. Because first you start telling these stories from a place of authority, and then as the kids get older, and this is from my experience, you start telling these stories from don't be stupid like I was when I was your age. They kind of start off like that. Let's talk about that, because you have a role as a father, but I'm guessing, just thinking about the things you've said in your career, you were in the Army for 32 years. You said quite often people who go into the Army, they're pretty young. They're like 18, 19, 20 years old.
17.
There was a point at which you might have been kind of a father figure to some of these soldiers who were coming through and under your command. So talk a little bit about storytelling on a personal level, not just a professional level.
One, I did join the Army at 17.
Okay.
I turned 18 3 days before I graduated basic training, so that was a great time. Yeah. And through my younger years, I did actually have several, I like to say older leaders, right? They're younger than I am now, but they were really my father figures because my parents were no longer there. I'm still a 17, 18-year-old kid. I'm still learning the ropes of how it is to be a young adult and a soldier in the Army. You need someone to help you out or you're going to go wayward really fast. I did. I had a few folks that helped me out. An interesting story is I was in a training mode and I was out in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina at Fort Bragg. Way up, we call it the back 40. It's where all the drop zones are. There's nobody out there. And I'm road marching. And road marching is really hiking with a bunch of weight on, right? But it's just the military pack, right? And it's you toughen yourself up, toughen up your body and everything else like that because it's a long road marches. And I'm out there on the weekend doing it by myself, and I'm out there, and then I see a random guy come by. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, random dude. And I was sitting down taking a break. He's like, oh, you mind if I join you? I said, no, don't mind at all. And we were BSing, and he's a teen series, which is a special forces guy, especially to get assigned to Fort Bragg, and I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, and we were just chatting away, and he looked at me, he's like, hey man, how come you're not using your waistband on your rucksack? I said, well, we don't do that in the 82nd. We just don't do that. I'm a tough guy. We don't do that kind of stuff. He's like, you're an idiot. I was like, where have I heard this before? Oh yeah, I heard this from my dad. You're an idiot. What are you doing? He's like, hey man, cut the dang straps, your tape on there, put it around your waist, clip it in, because it takes the weight from your shoulders, shifts it to your hips, where your body weight carrying it on your back should be all resting on your hips. I did that. I stood up and I was like, dude, are you kidding me right now? This is amazing. He's like, yeah, how about you go back and tell the rest of you the same thing? He's like, hey man, good luck, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And then he went one way and I went the other way. Wow. I go back to my organization. I am a platoon sergeant. You have a platoon leader who's an officer, and I'm paired with him, and I'm the platoon sergeant. So I am the senior non-commissioned officer in my platoon. And no stuffing. That Monday morning, I said, okay, team, here's we go. Cut the tape, do this. Everybody looked at me funny. I was like, nah, I'm telling you, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. So we go on our ruck march. We get back, and the guys and gals are like, that's amazing. I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. We've had this piece of equipment. It's been with us from every rucksack you've ever owned, but in the 82nd, we don't use it. Like when you're going to jump, you do tape it up because it does present a safety hazard. Okay. But it's not too hard to cut a piece of tape.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to unwind tape. We just never did it. So at that moment, mid to late 90s, I had an aha moment. And literally in the middle of nowhere on Fort Bragg, North Carolina, two guys, random chance meeting, and I learned a valuable lesson. Use the equipment you have. Use the tools that you have. It's there for a reason. Use it. I'm like, okay, I guess I will. So I actually use that story quite a bit is, hey, you have the tools. Don't forget to use it. I mean, obviously, sometimes you got to put them away, right? Especially if it presents a safety issue. But at the end of the day, if you have it, use it. Because if not, you may be struggling more. And so I learned this lesson out in the middle of nowhere. It was fantastic.
That is so cool. Just like you said, chance encounter. And that whole story wrapped around that chance encounter and just being out in the wilderness. Well, it's not really, it's a lot of pine trees. I'm like an hour and a half away from there right now.
Oh,
I'm in
nice.
Raleigh. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina. So
yeah, I love Raleigh.
So you're in the middle of nowhere and you run into this person and now you've got a great story to share, which can influence your unit, which was able to enhance everyone because now they can do their jobs a little more efficiently, getting themselves and not being completely spent. They were using the tools that they already had, which was kind of cool because that translates to so many different things, right? If you're talking to a CEO, you can be like, hey, use the tools you have. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And then you can point at it and be like, yeah, it's been there the whole time. You just haven't used it. Or people like I was just making fun of myself on the last podcast interview where sometimes I'd forget to delegate because I feel like it's going to not take very long. I may as well do it because I know I'll do it right. And well, gosh, I could have used not only the leverage and the cooperation of the people who are around me to support that kind of thing, but also giving them a chance to learn and demonstrate what they can do. And I missed it.
That's the greatest part about delegation. Sit back and watch your team get to the finish line. And sometimes you're like, I would never have thought of how to do that. They said, that's better than what I thought I was going to do. Perfect. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say I think our team surprises us a lot more than we think they will when we delegate the responsibility it's down to them. Not the authority, but the responsibility. Or the authority, but we keep the responsibility, right? Because we obviously got to make sure that at the end of the day, we are in charge of folks and leading folks. And whatever our team does, good, bad, or otherwise, it's our responsibility to ensure that they've got all the resources they need.
Let's say you're working with someone who's leading either a project or they're leading a company or they're just leading other people. And they have the awareness, because I talk so much about awareness on this podcast with people, because if you don't know that you have an issue, or if you don't know you have a superpower, or if you don't know that that thing that is on your rucksack that's taped up could be really making your life a lot better than it is, then you don't know and you can't do anything about it. But let's say someone comes to you and they realize, like, hey, TJ, I saw you talk to that group the other day and you had them in the palm of your hand, and I can't do that currently. I've never been able to make that connection. What are some things you might coach a person to do if they're more interested in the growth that it requires to be able to have the confidence? Because storytelling does take a certain amount of confidence. It's not just listing the facts and feeling smart. It is trusting the other side that they're going to be interested in what you have to say and kind of leading them through a journey. So what's some of the advice you've given people?
My wife and I, outside of having our daughter, we have other kids. We have a group, we have a little signal chat called the Misfits, and these are young 20, 30-somethings, and they call us mom and dad. It's awesome. Actually, we've had several moments with them, but we'll go specifically with this story. I actually had someone come up and say, hey, I'm not a really good public speaker. I'm not really this. I'm not really that. And so my first thing I tell everybody is like, hey, every time we tell ourselves we can't do something, we place an obstacle in our path. And the obstacles that we place in our own path are generally the hardest ones to remove or to get around, because we did it. And we have already told ourselves we cannot do something. From that discussion aside, what I normally do is, if I have the time right then and there, so let's go sit down and have a coffee, let's have a lunch, let's have a whatever it is. Especially my previous life when I was in the Army, if I didn't have the time, because I was very busy, I said, hey, let's do this. Get on my calendar, because then I can literally lock off time so that I can solely focus on you, the individual. Because if I have to go somewhere, I am very focused on what I have to do next, preparing on my head and everything. What I like to do is I'll sit down with that individual somewhere. Like I said, I try to do it in a neutral place, somewhere where it's not office related, because I don't try to do it in my office. I don't want to do it in their office. And we just start talking. And then I start asking questions like, oh yeah, tell me a time about this, tell me about this, and tell me about that. And then they'll start talking about a personal story or a professional story, something that's either a hardship or something they did that was fun. I said, oh, cool. What'd you take out of it? And then they start talking about their leadership lessons or their life lessons they learned from it. And at the end of it, I said, so do you know what you just did? Like, oh no, I just told you a story. I was like, yeah, you did. And you know what I did? I was engaged the whole time. I thought it was really neat. It was really cool. And they looked at me like, I said, you can do it. You just did it. Now, I would practice on a smaller group, because I know standing in front of a lot of people is very difficult at times. And I remember sitting in front of 20 people the first time. I was like, oh God, here it comes. Fits and starts, and you get more and more comfortable. And that's why I told them, hey, just think about these people as if they were your friends you've never met before. And you literally just tell them a story. Have fun with it, and just ensure weave your message in there. And I said, you've already done it with me. You just literally did it. It was great. And like, oh, I didn't think I could ever do it. I said, well, again, that's what it comes back to. Every time we say we can't do something, every time we do it, it's another rock and another rock. It isn't just this one rock gets bigger, but now you got a whole path full of I can't do somethings. And it may be the same thing. I can't do this. I can't do public speaking. And then 3 days later, well, I remember I told you I couldn't do public speaking. I said, well, that's your second obstacle that you just put in for. Now you got to go through the first, I can't do public speaking. Now you got to get to the second, I can't do public speaking. And so you've laid this quote unquote minefield of rocks in front of you of all the I can't do somethings, when at the end of the day, you can do it. You just have to get comfortable doing it. It's like writing a book, especially about your life. You get thousands of people potentially could read it. And now they're going to look at it and go, so I give to every author out there that's published a book, to folks who are on podcasts, people that just get their stories out, whatever pick a media. People are going to love it, people are going to hate it, and there's going to be folks in between. But they had the courage to do it. And so I give those folks, all the storytellers out there, congratulations on getting your story out there and having the courage to do it, because it takes a lot to put your life out there in front of everybody so that they can hopefully learn about it, but they're going to know who you really know who you are as an individual. So yeah, that's what I tell our young cats is we all have the ability. We just have to have the confidence in ourselves to do it. And it takes practice. And we may stumble, which is okay. In fact, I've failed more times than I could count. I have failed far more times than I have succeeded. You know, WD-40, the first 39 failed, 40 worked. Good for the inventor, right? That's as the old story goes. But yeah, so on that note, like I said, we have our kids, our adopted kids, and all the folks along the way. That doesn't have to be someone young either. It could be anybody from any age. I've had people come up to me at my age and say, I just can't do this. I can't talk in front of people. I said, you can. And then we use the same scenarios or the same environment, same coaching way to get folks to actually tell their story, and they realize, oh my gosh, I can't do this. So yeah, that's the long way of saying that's how I do it.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because what you alluded to is some of the most important stories we tell are the ones we tell ourselves. And we're always telling stories to ourselves about pretty much everything that happens. That person didn't text me back in 30 seconds, so I'm going to tell myself a story about that. And you know, that person didn't reply to the email in 24 hours, so I'm going to make up a story about that. And then I was pretty tired yesterday, so okay, I'm either going to make up the story that I'm coming down with allergies, or maybe it's the flu, or maybe death is waiting outside my door about to start knocking. So whatever the story is, you're telling yourself, just maybe say, hey, is this story true? Is it a story I want? That's fun. I want to talk about something that this is really making me think about, because you said stories predate the printing press, which is totally true. Stories predate everything, and they were passed down verbally, and then they started to be handwritten, and then before that, even they were sung. You know, there are a lot of songs that are stories. And it occurs to me as we're talking about that every iteration in technology is really just another clever way to get stories out to more people more quickly. So if we think about the printing press, and then we think about phonographs, even because songs are stories. So then we got this thing, you wind it up and it's got this big cone, and you can play records, and you can distribute those records, and you don't have to be standing in the room with the person singing the song now. You can be anywhere that has a phonograph, because there weren't that many. But then we got the radio coming out a little later, and think of all the stories that got passed with the radio. And like one of my favorite movies of all times, like The Christmas Story, you know, little kid Ralphie, and so he's rushing home to listen to Little Orphan Annie, and it's just
that's it.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't say he was happy about what he heard, but
I love that scene.
He was still entranced with the stories that happened, and he couldn't see anything. There was no visuals at that point, but then television comes along and gives us a whole another sensory experience. Now we're hearing it, we're seeing it, and it sort of does shut off our imagination maybe a little bit. That's one of the things that's cool about stories that don't have a visual, is especially with books. I've read it where books are cool because they're like we're staring at these symbols and hallucinating at the same time, because we're reading the words, but our mind has to fill in the visual. Whereas if we're watching a movie, it's kind of all fed to us.
I'm going to use that, by the way.
Yeah, it's...
I'm going to use that. We're reading a book while we're hallucinating. I am totally going to use that. Thanks. That's great. I'm going to put that in my toolbox, because I've never heard that before, and I love it.
It's like, when I saw that, I was like, oh, that is totally what's happening. We are just looking at these little symbols, and we're having a dream while we're awake. And in what's going on in my movie is probably similar and wildly different than what's going on in your movie if we're reading the same book, just based on our experience. And every time technology advances a little bit, it does seem like it is trying to get, think of websites, trying to get stories out to as many people as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean the stories are better or higher quality. It just means that more people can access them And I mean, that was the whole point with social media. Hopefully more people can connect and understand each other's journey. Definitely has not happened that way. Hopefully was the thought behind it.
Right.
But when it comes to stories, they're universal. And I think in literature, well, like 7 or 8 main stories or storylines. Have you heard that?
Yes.
I am not an authority to be able to list them off right now, but it's kind of like the hero's journey, and then man against nature, man against man, man against justice, those types of overarching themes with the story. And I want to talk about what was going on with you when you started the Warrior Dad Stories, because there was somewhere along your journey you were like, you know what? I've got a lot of stories, but I'm not the only one. And you wanted to get them together. I'm on your website right now, warriordadstories.com. I want to shout that out because it looks like you're doing some really cool stuff there. And I'd love for you to
Thank you.
tell us all why.
It started with this guy right here. So this is Cool Bear.
All
My
right.
daughter got him for me on my very last deployment, which was very different from all the other ones. So my 8 times previous, I actually saw combat. In combat, doing all the things I've asked as a soldier on the ground, doing all. And then on my last deployment, I was a brigade sergeant major, working with my brigade commander with 1,500, almost 2,000 individuals in the brigade. So my daughter gave me this bear, and like a flat Stanley, she said, "Dad, you got to take pictures of him everywhere you go." I said, "Okay, I'm in." So this dude got pictures everywhere we went. And then I started writing, because I didn't have much time, so I was like, oh, I just write haikus. Haikus are, I wouldn't say simplistic, but you could bang it out fairly quickly, right? Once you get that formula down and get the mindset for it. So I took a bunch of pictures with them. Then I would go back in there, and if I didn't have the time then, I would write haikus about that picture. And I wrote sometimes I wrote a bunch of haikus about one picture. I mean, he's been in an F-16. Well, a friend of mine's an F-16 pilot. So he's done that. He's been on the range with me. He's been everywhere. And then when I got home, this was in 2017-18 time frame when I was in my last deployment. And then when I got home, I was looking at all these poems. I said, wouldn't it be interesting if I could tell a story to my daughter on all my other deployments on what I did, because I haven't really told my daughter what I did. And at the time, really didn't want her to know, just because the violence that was behind a lot of my deployments. I was like, hey, if I could have Cool Bear watching us do these things, I started inserting into my memories, and then I would look at older photos, and I started writing that way. So I wrote a series of haikus and odes. So that was again, 2018-19, I started to do that. And then right before I went to retire, about my 2-year mark before I went to retire, I was kind of cleaning up around the house, and I was going through some of my old stuff into my computer, and I see all these poems. I said, okay, I wrote these for my daughter. I have never given them to her. At some point, I probably should do that right. I gave her a couple of them with a couple of pictures, but I had so many of them. So I actually started writing a book called The Adventures of Cool Bear. That manuscript for Volume 1 is completed. My illustrator is amazing, so shout out to Ronnie, my illustrator, for that. That is done. I'll get that published at some point, but I didn't know when, and I didn't really, at the time, didn't really know the how. And then as I was looking at Cool Bear, I realized some of those were contextually a little too much for young children. Like, it wasn't fit for a children's book, like for toddlers and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I can write one specifically, no stuffing, specifically to my daughter. And so I did. I took a lot of the haikus and I expand them out into larger poems, odes for my daughter. I have a group of friends that I deployed with. I got my brother and a few other folks that I said, hey, I've got about 35 poems now. Maybe I think maybe at the time I had like 40, but I cut it and I sliced it down to 35. I said, how do I make a story out of this? And then my buddy's like, why don't you make a story like when your first deployment, you're leaving, your daughter's there as a young kid, and now you're home and she's a young adult. How do you sequence it that way and tell the story that way? Because you've been deployed so much, you miss so much of her life. I was like, oh, that's a good idea. So in the book, it's actually a dad deploys when his daughter is 6 years old. And that's when my daughter, for me, told me on that day when she was 6 years old is, hey, Dad, you're too scary. I want to go back home. Because she was with us on the summertime because she lived with my ex. And that's what set me on a path to reforge myself to who I am today, just because things happen overseas, and after a while, the armor you create breaks, and it was cracking pretty hard then. So she set me on this path to get for this journey for healing. And so that's why for me, 6 years old is a very significant time in both of our lives. And then through all those years, you see her growing up in the book. Her dad doing all these things, thinking about her. Her light is his shield, while he shields his teammates, and then he is a shield for the country. So he talks about all this, and then you see him coming home. You see him finally walking towards the star, that my daughter, V-Star, the shining light in my life. That's what I call her. And you see him walking towards that light, and then eventually starting to make his way home. And at the very end, they're standing back on the driveway. He's an older man. She's a young adult. And they're together embracing that they're finally back together again. Just through that story arc, a friend of mine saved my life. There's all these different things in there that I want to tell her, and through stories. And not only for her, it's really like you would actually talk about, like, how do I connect my story to others? How can I share my experience as broad a sense as I can through my combat experiences, not just for military veterans and active duty military, spouses, families, everything else, but if you've never had an association with the military, can you pick this book up, look at it, and go, oh, I also make sacrifices for my family through time, through work, through whatever obligations that we have. Now, a lot of times our professional and personal obligations don't align. Well, I would say don't align, but there's conflicting priorities. And then how do you sit down and read a story to your young kids? Now you have to be your kids, but even young adults, and say, hey, remember the time that I had to do this instead of come and see you? Or I didn't do something at work because I wanted to come and see you, and I had to make a sacrifice somewhere along the line because we can't be at two places at one time, and the stresses that it causes on families. But if I could have someone look at that and use any one of those poems as a jumping point to talk to their families, talk to others, talk to other people, that is what I want out of this entire thing, is just so that people, like you said, can connect from one experience to another, and then reach back to me. I would love to hear someone's experience. I love hearing great stories. And as I was telling a friend of mine, is maybe one of the things I'll do in the future is ask people, hey, if you don't know how to tell a story, or you're uncomfortable to push a story out, or if you want me to write a poem or an ode about a short story, and if I can use it later on as a collection of stories that other people have told me, and they'll let me share it out to the world in a collection of poetry, love to do that. Because again, at the end of the day, is if we can help people connect positively, right? I'm all about getting people connected positively. I'm a smile, the world smiles with you is my number one life principle. And if we can get people to connect positively and say, if I could see where someone had a hardship, but they were able to pull through, and you know what, if that's the inspiration for me to do that, heck yeah, then we've won. Then we've done something good for somebody else anywhere in the world. Then that is literally what I hope this book and any series of books I do later, that is what I want out of all this stuff, is be a positive influence and inspiration for somebody else, just to throw hardship through, just even the greatest times in their lives, just to be able to share it with somebody else and say, yep, we did it. We got through it together. That is what I want. It'd be great if I could get it done. I'm looking forward to it. It comes out, and I'm looking at my clock here. 10 days is when it publishes. Yeah,
nice.
Excited, nervous, and excited at the same time.
I love what you said a second ago, because that's the thing about stories, that if you're a person who is wanting to study story because you understand that it is a great communication device, the first thing you're going to stumble on information-wise is that stories can't just be all happy all the time. This is a fun podcast for me because every week I get to talk with people who have been through some stuff in their life. They've been through some hardship, and they learned from it, and they came out on the other side stronger. And in a lot of cases, they want to take what they've learned, they want to take that hard-earned wisdom, and they want to help other people who are maybe having struggles. And one of the first things you learn in storytelling is there has to be a point where there's some tension. There has to be a point where there is something to overcome. And tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you call that the Reforge Journey in some ways.
I do.
Yeah.
On my website, I have a thing called the Creative Forge.
Okay.
And it has some of my, I like to say, the lost haikus. I think open it up. But down in the middle of the page is actually my award-winning poem. And it is about my journey from armored and breaking. This is a 3-part journey, the journey of Reforge. It's Armor Didn't Break is part one, where you see a guy in the mirror. He's looking at in the mirror, but you see this past in the mirror. And his armor is starting to break. Things are not doing well for him. His family is telling him, "You're too scary. We love you, but we don't know if we can be with you forever if you don't start a journey to get to healing." And then the part two is the journey. I was in a traumatic brain injury clinic down in Tampa for a total of 10 weeks. And the James B. Haley Hospital, they were amazing at the post-deployment evaluation program. And very happy to be down there. And so that's the journey. That's the middle of the poem, is going there. And then you see the armor behind him as the armor starts coming off of him, the really heavy armor. And then the very end is the reforge process, where the men and women that were with him will always be with him. And as he's walking home to see his family, off in the distance, you see shadows of other people. They're not people from his memory. They're not people that have passed along the way. Those are the people that walked the path with him through that process. And not just the folks during that 10-week time. It's everybody that's walked into that on that path. And that path is going to be different for everybody, but everybody walks it at some point. And for me, it took a couple decades to walk that entire path. I'm still walking the path, realistically. But to start it, as my buddy I chatted with last night, the collapse happened when my daughter told me, "Hey, you're too scary. I don't want to be here anymore." And my wife reminded me, like, "Hey, we have talked about this before. We are struggling, and we need, as a family, we need to heal together." Then the come to Jesus moment of, okay, I've got to get healed. But that takes a long time, because you have to stare in the mirror. You have to face yourself. And that is the hardest thing, is to truly face yourself. And then, okay, I'm on the path, and you're going to step off that path. That path is time. When I say the path, that is time. I say it's very linear. You don't ever get it back. But you're coming off it on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, because it's difficult. And even now today, I talk about it a lot more because I'm more comfortable with it, right? I'm much more comfortable talking. I would never have done this when I started on my journey. Never would I have said anything about this 12, 15 years ago. I would never have said anything to anybody about this journey, except for maybe my brother and very, very, very few people. But then as you get into that, really deep into the process, you're going to step off it every now and then. But then you know that, okay, I'm not too far from the path. I can still see it, loop myself back onto it, and I'm going to keep going. And then, like I said, my daughter has always been my guiding light. I have been at the bottom of the well. There was a point in my life where I did not think I had too many options left. We'll just keep it at that. At the very end, I thought, my options are done. I don't think I need people want me around, or I don't want to be around. Made a conscious decision to say that is not who I am as an individual. That's not my core beliefs, especially when I talk about smile, the world smiles with it. How do I get my smile back? How do I do that? And it was a struggle. And now I look back on it 15 years, like, oh my gosh, I look back at that younger version of myself and go, man, that guy was struggling hard. I'm glad he took the hard path. It's the most difficult path, is to climb back out of the well, to walk that journey. It is the most difficult thing that we will ever do as a self. And I'm just very thankful for all my family and all my friends that were there to help me out along the way, because they never quit on me. At the end of the day, never quit on myself. Although some days, it was not easy. So that's on there. It's on that page. And like I said, folks, get on and read it and let it inspire you. Let it inspire you to walk your path and your journey. You may not be struggling today, but at some point we're going to face a crucible that is going to be very difficult, or we have already faced a devastating crucible, and we're still walking that path and trying to figure out a way to get on a path. I just hope that one poem can put you on a path to success for you, to heal, and to really just be comfortable with who you are as an individual, and just live life to its fullest, because that's what it's all about. Life is there to live. Mm-hmm. Life is for the living. Go out there and have fun with it. Enjoy what life offers. And I like what you said, a struggle. It's okay to struggle. In fact, I think it makes us better people. And it makes us better. It hones us. It strengthens us. Because if it's too easy, we're never going to learn. We're never going to learn today to make us better tomorrow. So I do like what you said about having those struggles along the way. Some are more difficult than others, without a doubt. But if we can have folks, and again, at the end of the day, look inwards to ourselves, because we are our own energy. We are the only ones that can make us go down this path. People will help. People will guide us. People will encourage us. Hell, there are some people out there who will discourage us, because that's unfortunately who they are. If you know those people, Cut them. Don't need them in your life.
Get them out.
Yep.
Get them out. I was talking about story and story structure to someone last week, and as I have studied it more on an academic level, I guess, and less of a consumer and more trying to be a creator of good stories, and I'm looking at how other stories that I've loved over my lifetime have come about. I was a kid when the original Star Wars came out. It was 1977. I was 3.
Too.
Okay. But I still saw it in theaters, and this friend was like, your parents must not have been as strict as my parents because I didn't get to see it. But I remember that movie was the coolest thing ever. And then along comes Empire Strikes Back and just ruined everything because it was a cool movie, but it was such a downer, man. The whole movie was just like struggle and Yoda riding his ass like, you got to do this better. You got to think more. There is no try and all this stuff. And then at the end of the thing, Han Solo's frozen in carbonite. And then we just, end the movie? Cool. I walked away from there. And again, I'm like 5-6 years old at this point. I don't know enough about story to realize that this is act 2 of a 3-act, like 3-movie trilogy deal. Until, of course, a few years later, the Jedi returns and kicks everybody's ass. And then we're back to where we were at the end of The New Hope. And I was like, okay, that's cool. But it took me growing up and realizing, okay, Empire Strikes Back was that struggle. It was that trying to stay on the path for some of the characters. And it was that temptation by the world and by society, and if you want to look at it that way, to stray off the path. And finding out who your dad is and Leia's your sister and all this other crap. But it was all weird for a 6-year-old. Yeah, dude, it was just a lot. But it was necessary, because if it was just, hey, we're blowing up Death Stars all the time, that would get pretty boring at some point. So gotta have that darkness to bring out the light. It fine tunes who we are as people, but it also, in a more general sense, it fine tunes a story so that when we do have the moral of the story or the thing we want people to learn, it's a little sharper because it's going to stay with them.
So agreed. On Star Wars, so we went up to the symphony here in Omaha, and we thought we were just going to be listening to the symphony playing all the songs for New Hope from John Williams. And I love John Williams as a composer. No, we were watching the movie while the orchestra played the music during the movie. So obviously there's captions of the movie and everything else like that. It was hard to hear because of the amazing music. And my wife and I said, hey, we'll get box seats. We'll get out there and do our thing because I love Star Wars. And I love John Williams. And it was just amazing. And, of course, everybody's cheering and everything else. So next year is Empire Strikes Back. So I think they're doing it every year, each season. So thankfully we'll be here all the way through Return of the Jedi. So really looking forward to that. It's going to be awesome. I was in Japan when I saw Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back because my dad was in the Navy.
Wow.
And, it took a while for the original to get there, and actually Empire Strikes Back got there pretty quick. I think is, the logistics is, I guess, a little bit better over time. I remember watching Star Wars and the Empire Strikes Back while I was a kid in Japan. It was awesome. And
that's super cool.
Maybe a quarter, might have been a quarter to see a movie.
Wow. That is even more awesome.
Right?
For sure. Well, this has been so much fun to talk with you. Is there anything, we've talked about a lot of different things. Is there anything you think people need to hear out there that we haven't talked about?
I've written a book. I'm doing all these things. I'm getting ready to publish it. And through my years, and you asked about how do I talk with people, how do I share stories, and we talk about different story arcs and structuring of a story. I'm getting ready to do a speaking engagement with the Flight Commander's course here on Offutt Air Force Base tomorrow. And I always tell people, hey, I've got, over the years, I've developed, I kind of realized 4 things in my life that have really helped me out is, number 1, smile. The world smiles with you. Number 2, be disciplined in thought, word, and deed. And I'll talk about obedience, discipline. Be fit, mind, body, and spirit, and then live life to its fullest. And I say you do all those things, it wraps you back around to number 1, smile, the world smiles with you. I lost my smile for a long time, and I finally got it back, and I'm very, very happy about it. And then for you, I will be at Beehawk 7 November for a book signing at the distillery down there. I've got it locked in. Brad and Jess Halling own the distillery. They're good friends of ours. I am looking forward to getting down there with them. And for the team that's out there, for the whole North Carolina team and all my teammates out there and everybody who is going to be my new teammates, which would be great. That's when I'll be, 7 November. And again, please reach out. I would love to connect with anybody and just share your story. And we'll share stories left and right. Either find a place if we're local to here, or if I'm out anywhere in the world and I'm near you, we'll go share some stories. And if you want me to help you share a story, if you're either uncomfortable or don't know how to do it, please reach out. Because again, it's the end of the day, it's all about connecting one person to another or one person to many. It's all about sharing inspirational stories from the hardship to where we are today. And even while we're still going through it, because again, it's a journey. It's not a destination. The healing is never a destination. It's a journey. There are different points along the way that we're going to try to get to. A destination here, a destination here, a destination here. But once we get there, what's next for us? Because that's what's fun about life. There's always something new to do, always something new to learn, and to have fun doing it. Even through some of our struggles, having fun a lot of times can be, can I get there? Can I get through this struggle? And maybe years later, you look back and like, I did it. We did it.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for letting me come on here. And I love North Carolina. I can't wait to get back home when my wife retires. North Carolina for us is our home. We have a house there.
All right.
And we are really looking forward to getting back to the Southern Pines area, because it's just North Carolina is very beautiful. We love it.
I love it. Well, thank you for spending some time this afternoon, and I'll look forward to being at that book signing. I just wrote it down.
Perfect.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.